From the 15th District in California to talk to us about the memo that the Democrats have released. Again, joining us from the 15th District and a member of the Intelligence Committee, Congressman Eric Swalwell. Congressman, how are you this morning?
I'm good. I'm good. Good morning, Mark. Thanks
Good.
for having me back.
It's a pleasure to have you, of course. So this memo, Congressman Schiff and the Democrats released this memo. Um, is this the same memo that was submitted to the president that he would not declassify?
That's right. And what was released to the public over the weekend had a number of redactions. Our hope was that the public would see everything that point by point rebutted what the Republicans had put out there, which most simply was to protect the president and undermine the FBI. I still believe that the public has seen enough from what was released on our end to show that there was overwhelming amount of evidence to surveil Carter Page, that the investigation actually began much earlier because of George Papadopoulos and his contacts with individuals who had dirt on Hillary Clinton, as well as to also put to bed this idea that the court did not know that there were political motivations behind the memo. They did know, and despite knowing, they still granted the application anyway because of the arsenal of evidence against Carter Page.
So the court actually knew that, and it did not deter them from granting this warrant.
That's right. The court knew that Carter Page was someone who had been under surveillance before because of his contacts with Russia. They were aware of his writings about Russia. They were aware of his travel over to Russia in 2016 at a time that Russia was interfering in our campaign. You know, if you don't surveil someone like Carter Page, I don't know who you do surveil if you're using the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act to try and understand if an individual in the United States is a foreign agent of another adversary.
And we also know, I mean, it's confirmed too, isn't it, by the memo, Congressman Swalwell, that Russia was actively recruiting Carter Page, correct?
Well, we know that they had given him a forum that was quite unusual for a person of his standing. So they asked him to come over in July 2016 to be the commencement speaker at the new economic school in Moscow. Now, the last U.S. person to have that honor was Barack Obama when he had visited Russia many years earlier. So it did appear that they were courting him, that he was seeking business relationships in Russia at the time of the campaign. And again, we know that this is also similar in the approach that was made to George Papadopoulos in April of 2016, in that he was in London being contacted by Russians, being suggested that arranging meetings between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin could be helpful to the campaign. And he was previewed, Mr. Papadopoulos was previewed dirt that would eventually be anonymously disseminated regarding Hillary Clinton. And so they were both on the same foreign policy team, and within months were traveling, meeting with Russians as Russia was interfering in our campaign. I think those are the types of people you want to surveil.
We should note that the surveillance was approved by Republican appointed judges, correct, Congressman Swalwell?
That's right. The FISA court is made up of both Republican and Democratic appointed judges, and the standard of proof to get a warrant in the FISA court is probable cause. And the reason that it's lower than beyond a reasonable doubt is because this is a process that occurs early in an investigation. So before you would ever go to a jury with evidence, you would want to be able to surveil individuals like this, collect evidence, and decide if ultimately, if it was a criminal case, wanted to seek an indictment. So it's a much lower standard that clearly was met because of Carter Page's prior contacts, his travel over to Russia, and his own outward statements about ties to the Kremlin. Those were all important for the court to know about Carter Page.
It seems to me that Devin Nunes and others have been kind of timid and quiet since the release of this memo. I mean, I haven't heard a lot from them, obviously because it pretty much undermines the little stunt they tried to pull in releasing theirs, doesn't it?
Well, if past this prologue, Mark, we're going to see another effort to obstruct our investigation. If you remember, March 20th, 2017, James Comey came to Congress and said that the president's campaign was under criminal investigation, and immediately Devin Nunes went to work, went over to the White House,
Right.
and created the smokescreen of a unmasking allegation, and that was debunked. And now, we've seen as individuals like Steve Bannon are invoking privileges that don't exist, and Corey Lewandowski is refusing to testify. In that same week, they spin up this memo obstruction, and now we expect that, as Bob Mueller continues to seek indictments, that they will find new ways to try and undermine the FBI and affect our ability to understand what Russia did and hold people responsible.
Should we be comforted, though, even though Steve Bannon won't talk to Congress, their reports are he's talking to Mueller? I mean, should that be some source of comfort? I don't know.
A lot of people always view Mueller as the backstop, the insurance policy against the obstruction you see in Congress. But I think that the efforts in Congress to undermine the FBI, have a spillover effect into Mueller's investigation. He needs impartial jurors. He needs judges who have faith in the FISA application process, and he needs to be able to have all the time and runway to do his investigation without outside pressure. So I do believe that the efforts inside Congress are really directed at undermining the criminal investigation outside Congress. So I hope that he can proceed. And being in the minority until we win the House, we'll do all we can under the leadership of Ranking Member Schiff to try and show the public what the Russians did and make recommendations so we never find ourselves in a spot like this again.
I think, Congressman, you're making a case for Nunes himself to be charged with obstruction.
Well, I just want us to be able to do our jobs, Mark. Honestly, I think most Americans look at this and they see that Russia fully intends to hit us again in November, and that because of obstruction from Devin Nunes and others, we're actually more vulnerable to an attack than we were back in 2016, because other countries, just like Russia, with similar capabilities, they look at the disunity that obstruction has created, and they see blood in the water. And why wouldn't they try and get their preferred candidates or policies in place if we're not going to do anything to make the country safer?
Last thing, Congressman, you mentioned some redactions. So if I'm reading this correctly, the memo also makes the case that surveillance of Carter Page yielded useful information, and it is that useful information that is what is redacted, correct?
Well, there's a number of pieces of information redacted, and I can't go into that, Mark. I'll just say that the memo, as put out, as unclassified now, does not have any new sources or methods, and that's because we went through a process that the Republicans were not willing to do. We asked the Department of Justice to look at our memo. They looked at the Republicans' memo, and they said it was reckless and dangerous to put it out there. It was put out anyway. We asked them to look at ours, and we do not agree with their redactions, but we do think it still shows the omissions that the Republicans had in theirs, and most importantly, gives us an opportunity to just move forward and get back to the business of interviewing witnesses and reviewing evidence.
All right. Congressman Eric Swalwell, 15th District of California.
Thanks so much, Mark.
Hey, man, always good to talk to you. Okay, thank you.
You too.
All right, take care now. Good to get that information and that update from